Welcome, everybody, and thanks for joining today. We are going to jump right in. We're not even going to spend time waiting for people to trickle in because there's a fair amount to cover, and we want to do it all in 30 minutes or less. My name is Patrick. Ken took a big, deep
No,
breath
yeah,
there
I was
because
getting ready.
he's going to, yeah, fire hose of information. We will do our best to answer questions in line as they come out, so please feel free to use chat or the Q&A section to post your questions. We'll do everything we can to answer. And for those of you who are not joining us live and watching the recording, always feel free to shoot a message to support at modusvr.com if you have any questions regarding any of these new features. And Ken, take it away.
All right. Thanks, everybody. So we released Modus 2.1 last week. That was our first major release since Modus 2 came into production. Expect plenty more of this to come. All right, so we're going to cover not everything that's in the release notes. So if you're looking for every last detail, especially bug fixes, we're not going to call that all out today. So be sure to read the release notes that are in the launcher. But we are going to cover the bigger stuff. We're going to start with the smallest things first, the smallest of the bigger things. And so I'm going to switch over to my Modus view and we'll get going. So right off the bat, one of the nicer little creature features we added is recent. So any project you've worked on recently will show up here in this list, which is just a really nice thing to have. We've also added a help menu. All of this stuff was already available, so there's not necessarily new content with the exception of maybe documentation, but it's just a quicker way to get to these things. Big shout out to Riley. He has been hard at work on our documentation for months and months now. So we have a full wiki of, it's pretty comprehensive, but it continues to get worked on every single week. So if you are looking for something in the documentation and you think that certain area could be fleshed out more or something could be clearer or you're having a hard time finding it, please let us know. And that'll help us know what we need to focus on the documentation or on making that better. Okay, so first things first, I built out this little project earlier today just to kind of walk through some of the new objects and object updates that are in Modus. So we're going to start with iCart TX, formerly known as Avtech, if you're familiar with them. They have this new product called the tabletop mount. This is a really quick and easy way to add video conferencing abilities to an existing space, especially things like huddle rooms that maybe didn't have the infrastructure for it. It's a really basic object. It has a mount for a camera, mount for a display, and then we also visualize being able to show equipment in the back, and you can toggle that back panel on and off. It's a really cool thing. I recommend you check it out. We've also added some more products from Vadio. We added the Zoom Shot 4K, both in white and black. And then we also added the Conference Shot EPTZ. This has a lot of different mounting options, which is really cool, including a ceiling mount. When we added that, we also updated the IntelliShot to have the same mounting options. It didn't quite have as much functionality there. So those are all now in the system and in parity with each other as far as mounting goes. And if I'm going too fast, please speak up in the comments, but most of the stuff is going to be pretty easy to review. Jabra, we've added a handful of things. We added their room scheduler here. Like any room scheduler in Modus, you can switch between available and occupied. As is the case with many schedulers, it has a light bar on the side to let you know its status, and you can switch between Teams and Zoom. And then, of course, it has all sorts of mount options. We also added the VBS, the 55 VBS, which is the next iteration of the Panicast series of video bars. We also added the U30, which is a much smaller thing, single lens, built more for huddle spaces and maybe your smaller to medium conference rooms. And then their speaker mic, which is a great little guy for tossing in the middle of a table for video conferencing. Okay, that is it for manufacturer-specific stuff. One area that we are starting to get into here is podcast studios. And when I say we're getting into it, I mean our customers are pulling us there. We've had some requests for these things. So there's a few objects that really help build this out. So the first is this little video mixer here. It looks really nice. Doesn't really do anything besides sitting there and blinking some lights at you, but it helps tell that story. And then once we get into the studio, we've got a couple things that are really handy here. The first is this LED panel light. And this one is really fun to play with. I highly recommend it, even if you don't have need for it. It's really easy to aim the light. You can adjust its height. And then if you slap it on the ceiling, it will get this ceiling mount as well. So it's a really versatile little light fixture here. A lot of fun. And then we also added a prompter. So this guy is both a camera and a teleprompter. Just like any other generic camera, you can preview what it's going to see. And since it is a generic camera, you can alter its field of view and zoom. So these are quick and easy, simple ways to start telling that podcast story. We're seeing a lot of enterprise companies and stuff starting to build out podcast studios. Okay, moving on. We've had a lot of requests for printers. So here we are. We've got a bunch of printers. These are all built into a single object. So if you go to your library, electronics, office, you'll see the printer here. The office phone has also been moved into this section. The office printer, to switch between them, you just resize it. And if you make it really tall, it becomes a floor standing unit. These are also sitting on top of our new standing desk. This is another generic object, so it is freely resizable. And of course, you can change any of the material options like you might expect. And then finally, we had a really big change to the cylinder primitive. So previously, when you brought this guy in, all you could do is change its radius, but it was fixed. It was always going to be a perfect circle. Now, if you come to the properties panel, you can unlock the width and depth so that they can be adjusted independently of one another. So you can make some fun things like a little boat. But we have actually had legitimate requests for this, so I'm excited to see what you guys do with it. Okay,
And
so
real
now we're
quickly, can you,
Yeah.
while you're in there, can you
Yeah.
just quickly show how you would mount a LCD display to the ceiling? And I'm assuming that means like in a suspended fashion, since you have some
Yeah.
cylinders in the room anyway.
Yeah, this is perfect timing. So we don't have, and I'm sure the question is because you put a display on the ceiling and it just did that. That's because we don't have a proper ceiling mount just yet. That is coming. So in the meantime, the best thing that you can do, and we see this done a lot, is with a primitive, either a primitive cylinder or a primitive block. A primitive block is actually going to be a little bit easier to work with, but both will achieve the same result. Once you've done that, then you can put the display on it and move the display around as you would need. The reason I recommend doing this with a primitive block instead of a cylinder is because the block, it's going to be really obvious which way the display is oriented. Whereas if I put the display on the cylinder, it's going to rotate really easily on it. And so this is it's just a little bit easier to do. And once you make them both black, like we just make it a powder coat, it's really hard to tell a difference between the two. All right, does that do the trick?
Yep.
Awesome. Okay. So
the
speaking of
response was
display,
awesome. That's perfect. I don't know if I'd say perfect, but it's pretty good.
I've heard 5 out of 5 stars
B+,
on my explanations. Okay, so now moving over to displays. We had a lot of changes in displays for this release, and some of them are really interesting to talk about. So the very first is this little screen size indicator is now interactive. Just like rulers, if you weren't aware, are interactive. I can click on a ruler and just type in a dimension. Now the same thing happens with display sizes. So when I click on this, I can type in whatever dimension I want and make it nice and tiny. And the other cool thing is, this is really common, but I could also do this in metric. If anyone's doing displays in metric, I don't know that they are. So that is now interactive. If you are doing that on a display that has fixed sizes, when you click on that display size indicator, you're going to have a drop down of the available sizes. So that way you can never configure it in a way that is illegal. But also in the properties panel, we have a few changes here as well. So now when I do, so it used to be that custom screen size was the very last option in the list of sizes of just kind of recommended sizes. Now it's up to the top of the list, and when you select it, you get manual input just to the right of it. So if I've got a kind of a preset value, that goes away, but if I come up to custom, I can now enter the value there. We also now have a screen resolution option, and I want to be very, very clear here. This option does almost nothing. So let's lower your expectations first. We're not doing anything to change the picture quality so that you could compare 1080 versus 4K. That's kind of a fool's errand anyway if you're trying to show a 4K versus 1080 comparison over a Teams call on a tiny display in a virtual world. It's just layers upon layers of things that won't work. But the reason we added that is for Discus, which we'll talk about at the very end. But just be aware that is there, and it's not going to really do anything for you. That selection will show up in the bill of materials, so that can be handy there. But while we are here looking at all the displays, I want to show a little change that's happened to design assistants. So our design assistants have been reorganized a little bit. We have these up at the top that are, these are just like really high level generic things. And we've added one here called Always Show Screen Size. So when you select this, every single display will always show its display size indicator. And this was a request we got from one of our customers, a couple of them at least. The great part is this also persists over to photo mode. Previously, the display size would only show up when you had a display selected, and in photo mode, you don't select objects. So there was like no way to show that. And now with this assistant, you can show it for all of them. But even while you're working, that can be really handy. So you don't have to just have a display selected to see that. Okay. And we are flying through this. We're going to come in at well under half an hour unless we've got tons and tons of questions. This is great. Okay. The next thing I want to cover is some changes to navigation. And this is a little bit harder to show because I'm going to be working on my keyboard, but hopefully you can see everything happening with my little lower third there. So the first big change we made was in favor of the workflow where you're working top down. So let's say I hid that ceiling there, and you're, maybe have like a reference projection to show the floor plan. And the way Modus previously worked, it was really painful to be able to do something in here and then just move along parallel to the floor. So we've made two big changes to help with that. The first is now your up and down movement, your space and shift on the keyboard are relative to the direction you're looking. So previously, if I was looking forward and I did up and down, space and shift, I would move up and down. And that still happens today while I'm looking forward. But now when I'm looking down and I press space and shift, I am moving basically perpendicular to the direction I'm looking. Whereas previously, if I hit space, I would have moved farther away from the floor. So that's a huge help for those of you that are working in this type of workflow. And then the nice part is if I want to move in and out, I just use W and S, forward and backward. So we haven't removed any functionality there, but we've just given you a much more comfortable way of doing this. The second thing that we've done to help this is a new hotkey altogether. And this one is one of my favorites that we've added, and that is the middle mouse button. So if I push and hold the middle mouse button, I can now pan around. So I'm not using my keyboard at all. This is just my middle mouse down, and then I'm moving my mouse cursor or my mouse around. And so what this does is it lets me very quickly shuffle side to side, up and down, and I'm not using my keyboard at all. And it feels really good once you get used to it. I strongly recommend you make a habit of using that one because it's so handy. The next thing we've done is we've also added in and out movement with the mouse wheel with a caveat, because still, if I have an object selected and I use my mouse wheel, it's going to rotate that object. But once I'm in movement mode or navigation mode, my mouse wheel will move me in and out. So right now I have my right mouse button held to temporarily enter navigation mode, and I'm using my mouse wheel. If I press M, then I don't have to hold my right mouse button at all. I just use my mouse wheel. Okay, one last thing on controls. I'm going to come in here and show you two things that we've added for altering this behavior. So first is viewport drag speed. That's that middle mouse button that we were just talking about. And you do have the ability to toggle an inversion on this. Some people like to think of it like they're grabbing the window, and other people like to think of it like they're grabbing the world, and invert will flip that behavior based on what's comfortable for you. And then we have move smooth or movement smoothing. What this does, if you've used Modus and you felt like movement felt a little muddy, it's because we slowly accelerate and then slowly decelerate when you're pushing a button and then releasing a button, respectively. Movement smoothing determines how aggressively you ramp up and how aggressively you accelerate and decelerate. So if I turn this all the way down, my start and stop is going to be very abrupt. So it feels very precise, very rigid, but it's not necessarily comfortable for somebody that's watching you. If you crank this all the way up, then things feel very fluid. It's a slow acceleration and slow deceleration. If you've updated to 2.1 and haven't changed anything, you won't feel a difference because this value is where it was before. We just didn't have it exposed to users, but now you have a little bit of control over that. I'll pause there. I saw a comment or a question, Patrick. Is that something we want to get to now, or if we have time?
Yeah, I mean, if you're well ahead of time, you can probably tackle it. Now is as good a time as any.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. So Chris is asking, I'd like to see, it's more of a feature request, but I think we can address it kind
Okay.
of. So I'd like to see an update that offers a snapshot recall function. This could be useful in divisible spaces to show scene changes, such as display changes when comparing projector screen versus LCD and presenter mode. Currently, it seems this is a manual change that needs to be done in a presentation. So,
Yes.
we don't have that feature exactly, but one possible way to show this would be using perhaps groups in the outliner.
Yeah, and it still would be a manual thing. So first I want to address, and that was Chris that asked that,
Yes.
right? Okay.
Chris,
So,
who is in South Africa, I can't imagine what time it is for him right now.
wow. Well, thanks for joining, Chris. So yes, totally agree. Especially as your projects get more and more complicated, it'd be wonderful to be able to save the current state of the project. And that could be anything from lighting values to objects in the room to media playing, whatever. We do have quite a bit of thinking around how we want to do something like that. Because ultimately we'd also like to tie that into photo mode so that you could automate taking images of several different states. In the meantime, the best way to handle that is with groups, which is still manual, but it doesn't have to be terribly painful. So let's say that, oh goodness, this is going to be a really strange build out, but let's say this is option A for a room. I can select all of these, group them, come into my outliner, and I built this project kind of wonky. Okay, so I can have this group here, and I'm just going to double click it to rename it, and we'll call this option A. And then I'm going to hide that. I could then come back and maybe what we're talking about doing like a projection screen and dueling projectors mounted to the ceiling. It doesn't make any sense, but it doesn't have to. All right, so I'm going to call this option B. Whoops. Double click it to rename it. Call that option B. Now that I have these two grouped, it becomes really easy to swap back and forth between the two. And so that's the least manual way to do it. At presentation time, you still have to dig through the outliner to find it. You still have to make sure everything is set up well, but that is as good as it gets today. But yeah, we hear you, and that is something that we want to make even better.
Chris says that is extremely useful, and I'm just going to throw out there that Ken still is working on getting his CTSD, folks, just in case you were wondered about his design.
I don't see anything wrong with this. 5 out of 5 design. Okay, perfect. All right, so that's it for navigation. So now I want to talk a little bit about presenting. So Modus is, at its peak when you are presenting live, when you're showing people the power of two projectors pointing upwards next to a projection screen. Because some people just aren't going to understand how awesome that is. And so we want to do everything we can to help you present better. And if you wanted to provide a high resolution, high frame rate view into a video call, for example, you would need to use something like OBS. And if you're not familiar with OBS, it is a great piece of software. Reach out to Riley on how to use it. But it is what we use, for example, to do my lower thirds and showing and hiding those. It's really good for that. However, it still isn't perfect. One, it means you've got to be running OBS while you're doing all of this. But two, that still doesn't give the best presentation possible, because as I am doing stuff, you're seeing my UI fly in and out, and it can be a little bit distracting. So to solve that, we've introduced what we call presenter mode. And so I'm going to, I'll show you how that works first. So up in the top right corner here, we now have this new button called presenter mode. And I'm actually using half of presenter mode's features right now, but I want to show you exactly how good it can get. So I'm going to switch over. So right now I'm just showing you my screen, but now I'm going to switch over to my presenter mode view. And this is really hard to explain what's happening. But basically, one of the options of presenter mode is it will hide your UI, but only for people on the far end. So on my screen, I still see my UI and everything. But presenter mode outputs a special feed into a virtual webcam. So if you've been using Modus for a while, you've seen this thing that doesn't actually work in Teams or Zoom. It's called the Modus Virtual Cam. That now works as of 2.1. And so when you switch over, let's say you're hosting a Teams call and you switch over your camera to the Modus virtual camera, people will have this view. And so right now, I am navigating around the product library.
Could you possibly do a screen share simultaneously? Would that work? So people
Well,
can see your UI?
Yeah, no? I've got another idea. Because yeah, it's not great. Okay, so this might like flicker for a sec. Okay, so oh man, this is something else here. Okay. On the left, I have shrunk Modus. So it's just, you're looking at my computer desktop right now. So on the left is Modus. On the right is a web browser showing the Modus virtual webcam. So on the left is my view. On the right is the view that people would see if they were looking at what I shared over Teams or something. So as I am operating in here, like let's say I want to bring in a piece of furniture or something, I can look for it, drag it in, and as far as the audience is concerned, that thing just magically appeared. And when I come to the properties panel to change its color, none of the audience would normally be seeing my UI. And so presenter mode just helps make that experience a lot cleaner, a lot less distracting, and honestly, just more magical, right? They're not distracted by those things. They're just seeing stuff in the project change. It's more like they're just watching a render evolve as the discussion goes, rather than seeing somebody operate a tool. So Patrick, does this side-by-side view help a little bit?
I think so.
Okay. Yeah, let us know in the comments and chat if this is making sense or not, because it is really important to understand what's happening here, because it is a really cool thing. I'm going to maximize my view here and just come back to the Modus view where you can see my UI.
We're getting one person saying it makes sense, so I think
5 out of 5 explanation. That's all I'm hearing. Okay. So let me explain some of these controls here. So in the basic sense, you just click this button to enable presenter mode. It's off by default. You only turn it on when you want to use it. It does use a little bit of computer resources, so you don't want it on unless you're actually presenting. There's a few options. So one is to actually toggle showing the UI in the stream. Right now, I am not using my Modus virtual webcam. I am just sharing my screen. So if I were to switch to that, my UI goes away. So you are looking at my view, not the audience view. I can turn this on if for some reason the audience wanted to see my UI and I was trying to avoid using a complicated OBS setup, because the great part about presenter mode is you don't need OBS at all. These two here are really interesting options. So Patrick Riley and I have been doing Modus for years and years and years. And one of the common challenges, or one of the things you have to remind yourself to do when you're presenting, is to slow down, because you get really comfortable moving fast and it's easy to make it uncomfortable for your audience. And so what these two options do is enable basically a little bit of a throttle on you once you're in presenter mode. And so these take whatever your normal move speeds and move smoothing options are, and they multiply them. So right now, when I enable presenter mode, it lowers my move speed by 50%. And it increases my move smoothing 1.5 times. And so that just helps force me to slow down, but I don't have to go all the way into my controls to adjust it. It's just there. So it's a really nice thing. I don't have to touch it once I've got it how I like it. And then this last one, launch view and browser window. So this is actually what I was showing you just a moment ago, but I kind of spoiled it out of order because I don't know how to explain this very well yet. Because a lot of times Modus is used to present in person. So you're in a conference room and your display is being shown up on, it's being mirrored up to a larger display. And this is a really cool feature here. So I'm going to minimize again, and I'll show you exactly what's happening here. So when I need to shrink my UI. It's too small to fit in there. Okay. So when I launch view in browser window, this basically opens up a local browser on my machine that is pointing to the webcam. And because of Windows security settings, we always have to say allow while visiting the site every single time. And you do want to make sure that you're selecting Modus virtual camera. But once you've done that, that now puts Modus into a browser window. So if you are presenting in person, whether it's in a conference room or maybe you're at like a trade show or something like that where you want to be showing these things, great. Instead of mirroring displays, you have that other display as a second display. You put this web browser onto that one, make the browser go full screen. You just press F11, and then you are controlling everything. You're seeing all of this stuff, and the audience is seeing the UI-less version of Modus. So it's a really slick way to present. Again, you're kind of hiding a little bit about how the sausage is made, and it keeps the presentation focused on the actual project. And that's it for presenter mode. Are we good there?
There is, so Chris is saying that he launched presenter mode and it's not working, but I think that might be more of a support call. But I will say a couple of things to note. One, you definitely have to click the little icon. So that's thing number one. He's just getting the waiting for Modus to start message. Two, if you have not restarted your computer and you installed without shutting down Modus and or any other pieces of software that it might recommend you shut down, that could cause some problems. But we'll get on a call with you, Chris, and get that sorted out. But there are a few gotchas there.
Yeah, and also try it on other things. The very first thing to try is the launch view and browser window. See if that's working. If that's not working, then that's a different issue than if it's not working in Teams or something. And there's just a lot of moving parts to it. Okay, so finally, and now I spent so long talking, we actually have eaten through the 30 minutes, but that's good. I only had one last thing I wanted to talk about, and that is Discus. If you came and saw us at Infocom, you saw a sneak preview of this. But basically, Discus is Avixa's standard for screen elevation and screen size. I'll give you a quick run through of how that works. So if you are not familiar with Discus, it is all based around element height. So element height is defined as a percentage of the screen height, and it's usually referring to text. So when I enable the Discus Assistant, we get this little preview of a display. And we have decided that 3% is the smallest element height we are willing to accept. And that's a pretty standard thing, but you can change that. And so based on that 3%, anybody in this green zone, and this is calculated in 3 dimensions, so it's really about their face, not the table line. Anyone that's in green is going to be able to comfortably read that size of text. And so in this particular case, at this distance, these 3 people in the back are not going to be able to comfortably read text that small. Interestingly, these people in the front are too close. But they're too close and they're too far off axis. Now, as with all the assistants in Modus, this is updated in real time. So as I resize this display, we can start to very quickly see how big this display should be. And it looks like we need to be 95 inches or larger for everyone to be able to see this display. Similarly, as we raise and lower the display, you'll see this closest viewer boundary come in and out. So it's once again a good way to help tell that story. Now, these are also impacted not just by display size, but by our desired element height. So if we can say, for example, you know what, we're actually okay with a larger minimum element height, and we bumped it up to 3.5%. Oh, great, now everybody's inside that conformity zone. Now, if for some reason you need to be able to show a little bit more of a technical view of this, we also have that option. So simplified is basically saying, okay, everybody that is whatever our minimum element height is, in this case 3% or higher, they're all in a green zone. But if we want to break it down a little bit more, you can switch on the technical view, and this will actually show you the percent element height rounded to the nearest 0.5%, so you can see exactly what's going on. So this is really handy if you're trying to dial things in a little bit more or simply communicate what's going on. But it's super powerful, and you can also then see some more of the breakdown. For example, if you're familiar with the Discus spec, you'll recognize these lines shooting out from the right and left edges. From the side, you can see that 30-degree line coming down from the top of the display, and all of those things work together to give us this conformity zone. But it is really fun to be working with these and kind of see it all come together. And I just glanced at a comment. Yes, it is so nice to not have to deal with the math or the calculators. One thing I don't like about online calculators is, since they don't have all the data, it's a lot of manual input, but they often require that you already settle on one of 2 or 3 variables. So in the case of Discus, for example, you have to start already knowing your screen size or your farthest viewer. Whereas with Modus, we're simply just indicating how you're doing based on that screen size and placement. And so that lets you shuffle things around, right? If maybe the solution is just to scooch the table and chairs forward, and that's it. Cool. Or maybe it's make the display a little bit bigger, or maybe it's change its height. All of those things just happen as a byproduct of being inside a 3D environment like Modus. Okay, then to wrap it up, we'll talk about ADM, which is analytical decision making. Calculate distance in 3D. I need to explain what that is. One challenge with Discus, and we talked to the folks at Avixa about this, is it's not really, according to the spec, it's not really calculated in 3D. They just say we'll calculate from the right edge to a viewer and from the left edge to a viewer, but where on the left and right edge, and how tall are these viewers? What is their seated position? What's their standing position? And my understanding is they didn't go that far simply because 3-dimensional math is just even more effort, and there's already enough math to do. And so we default to doing the math exactly how Discus does it. But we also have the option to enable it in 3D. And the difference is subtle. It's not huge, but it is enough in some cases to make someone exit the conformity zone. So I'm going to turn it on and look at the lines along the sidewall there to see those change, they all get curved. And the reason for this is because we're calculating things in 3D. So if you picture, for example, tying a string to a corner of a display and then walking around that room, that's going to create one arc over here, and then tie a string to the right edge of the screen, and the same thing. And so that's happening on a two-dimensional plane. But really, if you're doing it in 3D, you should be not just walking around the room, but revolving all the way around that point. So you'd actually be creating a sphere around whatever point you select. Long story short, if you are looking to just be compliant with Discus, you don't have to turn on Calculate in 3D. But if you want to be compliant with the spirit of Discus in terms of making sure that people will be able to see text, especially in tiered seating, go ahead and do it in 3D. And we are at time, so I feel like I should pause there. ADM is really simple and straightforward. Oh, and Teams just froze for me. Can you guys still hear me all right?
Yeah, you're still,
we
still
hear you.
audible.
Okay. Yeah, Teams is
There you go.
There we go.
You're free. Oh, wait,
Yay,
maybe
I'm
you're
free.
not free. I don't know.
I'm alive. Anyway, ADM is everyone knows ADM. Its usefulness is limited, perhaps I'll say. So I'll pause there. Since we are over time, I'm happy to show it as well. But if we wanted to stop here, this is a good time, or answer any questions. Patrick, what's your take? How are we on Q&A and everything?
Q&A is quiet at the moment. I did want to plug our next couple of sessions, though. So we do have a Getting Started tutorial coming up next week on Thursday? August 27th, whatever the 27th is. Yeah, next Thursday. So if you're new to Modus or you just want to see how we recommend using the tool, that's a good one. And then we also have advanced sessions on the 2nd and 9th of September. So 3 sessions coming up. I'm cool to stick around for a few minutes and answer questions, or if people really want to dive into the analytical decision making, the ADM side of the Discus standard, we can do that. Otherwise, yeah, I think we're probably good to release the class for recess or lunch. It's 12:30 here on the West Coast. So.
Yeah, I'll show ADM, and then if people are interested, they can stick around, and if they're not,
everybody's going to go to recess. Those monkey bars, you got to be the first to get to them.
If people want to leave, I'll be offended, and it's fine. It's fine.
Someone already left.
So I've turned on ADM, and same thing. We can do a technical view or a simplified view. The technical view shows far less interesting stuff than the BDM technical view does. The challenge with ADM is it is based on display resolution. And the higher the resolution, the closer people need to be to the display. And so ADM's objective is to make sure that everyone can see pixel level details. It's not necessarily worried about text, which is why they don't use element height. It's really worried about how close do you have to be to see a pixel. So I have this display, and I'm just going to actually, I'll just delete all these chairs. I have this display set to 1080p, and I'll show you why in just a moment. But same concept. People ideally want to be within this green zone in order to be able to see everything on the display. Now, as resolution increases, the potential for tiny, tiny details increases as well. And so then that area of conformity shrinks as the resolution goes up at the same display size. So we're at 1080p. I'm going to turn it to 1440p. Here, I was zoomed. There we go. So 1080, you've got a decently sized one, 1440, and then 4K. It becomes so small, it is almost useless. And then 8K becomes so small it doesn't even register on the floor. And that's from our understanding where a lot of people give up on using ADM, is because you're often just limited by the practical size of a display in a room. So like a 4K display needs to be massive for it to be useful, or at least to be compliant with ADM. So anyway, that's how that one works. And that is why we added screen resolution, just so that we could do ADM correctly. Okay, and that is it for the release. So once again, like if there are manufacturers or even SKUs that we don't have, let us know what you need. Especially if it's a manufacturer we don't have, make an introduction. Put us in touch with your rep or whoever at that manufacturer that you have a good contact with. Let them know, like, hey, here's some successes we've had with Modus, with other manufacturers. It would sure be great if your stuff was in there too. But it means a whole lot more coming from you than it does from us. We can approach people, but it works a lot better coming from you. Okay, did I see a question come in, Patrick?
There is a question from Chris. Is there a way to use displays in portrait mode? This has not come up often, but I may want to do this for certain projects. Current rotation would be a great feature for custom projects. So,
yeah, so
I'll let you tackle it. I just said use a custom video is the only way, but go on.
Yeah, so I mean, if you rotate it, the content rotates with it, which is kind of what you'd expect. We have kicked around the idea of adding a way to just tell the display to rotate. If it's really important, you have two options. One is you can do custom media so that when you rotate it, your custom media is also rotated so it looks correct. Or you can, and I'm going to turn off the Discus Assistant here. The other option you can do is a custom aspect ratio. And then you could set those dimensions to be a 16:9 or a 9:16 aspect ratio.
Does any of the elastic media respond to that properly?
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. So
sorry, I used the internal term. What do we call it officially?
Compositions or whatever.
Compositions. Anyway, there we
go. So the challenge is most of our content is still going to be letterboxed unless you are using any of these that have this little icon. So this icon means it's intelligent. It's going to be a lot more flexible. So for example, the font sizes composition will handle it a little bit better. Some of these others, I mean, that one does a decent job. Excel will do a decent job. The Teams and Zoom won't. Status will do that doesn't look great. Yeah, we could make that one better. Does Traffic Games do better? Whoops. I really thought Traffic. Yeah, Traffic does an okay job. And then the abstract is always going to look about the same everywhere you go. But yeah, so content's going to be your pretty big limiting factor there. And then just convenience, right? Having to manually set the dimensions as opposed to be able to quickly do something.
Perfect. I don't see any other questions trickling in, so I think we'll call that a webinar done and only 13 minutes over time. I mean, you were technically done 5 minutes after.
Yeah, I was doing so well until I said I was doing well.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
That's what you get.
Yes.
You get overconfident. Great job. Thank you much for your time, Ken, and thanks everybody for joining who stuck around for the extracurricular activities. Again, if you have any questions or you get stuck with any of this, please always feel free to use support@modusvr.com. That comes to all three of us, so it is always the fastest and most effective way to get a response, especially like at odd hours. Riley and I have a tendency to email back if we're awake and we see it pop up. Ken is a big sleeper, so he's up early though, so he's our early solution. But please use the support at modusvr.com if you have any questions, you get stuck with anything, or just want to provide feedback. Thanks again, everybody, for joining, and we'll look forward to seeing you on the next one.
Thank you.